Hello everyone, welcome to Postcard Buddhism, the best channel for sharing knowledge about Buddhism. Today we will talk about the topic, mindfulness of right livelihood. Accepting that our work is an aspect of our spiritual practice is not easy. Many people separate their work from their spiritual life. However, when we sit down to meditate and reflect on our past actions, we must acknowledge that our work is indeed our action, even if it is done under orders or job requirements. Let's explore how our jobs can align with our spiritual goals and the principles of right livelihood. The secret the Buddha revealed when choosing a profession. One of my disciples told a story about a successful businesswoman who was very interested in Buddhist ethical precepts. Once she found a new business opportunity, several liquor stores were up for sale. She knew that if she took this chance to buy the stores, she could make a lot of profit. However, something held her back. When she contemplated the business of selling alcohol, she realized that some customers might be harmed. They might drink and then do harmful things. They might become heavy drinkers or worse, addicts. To protect her spiritual development, she decided not to buy the stores and passed up the business opportunity. This story highlights a clear truth. Our means of livelihood should not hinder our spiritual development. We cannot list all the professions or jobs considered daily right livelihood, but the Buddha gave us a basic guideline. Any work or profession can be considered right livelihood if it does not cause harm to the person doing the work or to anyone else. Of course, nothing is perfect. The only perfectly right livelihood is work done by a perfect person, one who has completely eradicated all greed, hatred, and delusion. But those of us still on the path to perfection can do much to align our work with our spiritual lives. As with most questions about Buddhist ethics, the reason why we should be concerned with right livelihood has two sides. Work that harms others is inherently wrong because it violates basic ethical principles, but it is also wrong because it harms the person doing the work. Since we are not yet enlightened, we cannot completely avoid being affected by anger or suffering. Meanwhile, the work we do may cause us to struggle with greed and anger. However, we can choose to avoid work that hinders our spiritual progress. If our job causes too much anger, our mind cannot be calm enough to meditate. Consider a very clear example. Suppose a person's job requires him to kill animals. He might be a researcher who has to test new drugs on lab mice, or he might be a fish or pork butcher. When this person meditates, his mind might be disturbed. Every day, he witnesses animals suffering at his hands. He sees the fear in their eyes and their struggle to escape danger. He hears their cries and feels their pain. These images haunt him when he returns home. To do this job, he must deceive himself into thinking that animals do not have feelings, that they are not really sentient beings who experience pain like he does. Deep down, he knows this thought is false, but he continues to kill because it is his job. This inner conflict agitates his mind, and gruesome images appear when he meditates. He cannot practice compassion. He cannot relax. Clearly, this person's job is not right livelihood. For some jobs, like killing animals, it is easy to see they are bad. For others, evaluating what constitutes right livelihood can be much more complex. Some jobs may be acceptable in one place, but not in another, depending on circumstances, such as whether an employer requires employees to act unethically. Considering the following three levels can help us decide whether a job is considered right livelihood or not. Questions to assess right livelihood. We can determine whether a job is considered right livelihood by asking ourselves three interrelated questions. First, is my job inherently wrong? That is, by definition, is the job wrong? Does it involve the production, sale, advertisement, or use of guns or other weapons? Does it involve poisons or addictive substances? Does it cause harm or death to living beings? The Buddha explicitly taught that occupations involving weapons, poisons, or killing are clearly not right livelihood. Many occupations clearly fall into this category. For example, researching and developing chemical or nuclear weapons, producing or selling pesticides, setting up networks to guide missile launches, or exploiting cheap labor are obviously wrong. I could also add that writing for tabloids that harm the reputation of celebrities or working for online programs that spread hateful speech should be considered a type of poison. as mentioned by the Buddha, as a wrong way of earning a living. The Buddha's teaching can be broadly applied to include non-traditional occupations. Earning a living from violent sports that cause injuries, such as boxing, is a wrong livelihood. Owning or working in casinos or gambling establishments is similar. Like alcohol, gambling can lead to addiction. It arises from greed and often leads to crime or harm to innocent people. Needless to say, criminal activities in any form, including speculation, illegal transactions, fraud, deception, and corporate crime, are wrong livelihoods. Occupations that endanger the health of the person themselves are also wrong livelihoods. Drug trafficking falls into the category of dealing in poisons. Drug dealers are notorious for their violent actions and bribery to protect their territories and avoid arrest. Certainly, their activities bring disaster to the weak who fall into buying and using drugs. Drug users also commit crimes to get money for drugs. Innocent family members suffer from domestic violence, deprivation, poverty, and the loss of loved ones to prison or harm. However, as our economic system has become too complex, sometimes determining what occupations are considered wrong livelihood is not straightforward. For example, is working for the military always wrong? It depends. If the job puts the person in a position to use weapons, including using computers to launch missiles, it may be considered wrong livelihood. But being a doctor or a cook does not have anything inherently wrong. I find it hard to believe that any cook, even in the military, would think, I am cooking for these soldiers so they can go kill. Other work situations must also be considered. For instance, manufacturing nuclear warheads is clearly one of the forbidden jobs according to the Buddha's list. But what about mining uranium for use in nuclear weapons? Or working in grocery stores where the majority of the revenue comes from selling guns? Or working for low wages in fast food restaurants? We can think of many work situations that indirectly harm others. A university professor might feel uneasy if his scientific research is used for military purposes. A steelworker's product might be used to make hunting rifles. In such cases, we need to ask ourselves, is my job directly related to weapons, poisons, or killing? Am I intentionally causing harm to others or myself? In summary, we can use the following general rule. The greater the separation between the work we do and the harm it can cause to others, the less likely it is to be a job incompatible with right livelihood. Second, does my job cause me to break the 5 precepts? If a profession passes the first test, then consider whether the work might make it easy to break any of the 5 precepts of right conduct. Ethical standards at our workplace can also turn a normal job into a wrong livelihood. For example, in one law firm, lawyers may be encouraged to maintain the highest ethical standards. In another law firm, colleagues may be pressured to fabricate evidence, deceive the jury, or overcharge clients. Engaging in such unethical actions at work makes our minds agitated, hindering our spiritual progress. I remember a lawyer who often came to Bhavana Society. During meditation, he would cry continuously. I wondered if his suffering was due to having done something wrong to win a court case. Similarly, there are cases where the job is good, but the person doing the job turns it bad. For example, an officer responsible for issuing driver's licenses can work conscientiously, strictly and carefully, refusing to accept bribes. But another person in the same job, in the same office, might become corrupt and accept bribes. A corrupt official cannot have right livelihood, but an honest one can. Any job, even a good one, can be corrupted. I know a doctor in Malaysia who routinely gave fake medical certificates to workers for a fee of about $5 per day off. This habit became so ingrained that when a patient entered his office, the first question he asked was, "How many days?" A famous Jataka tale about the Buddha and his malevolent cousin Devadatta speaks of 2 people in the same profession, but only one following right livelihood. In a past life, the future Devadatta first bore a grudge against the Buddha when the Bodhisattvas, the future Buddhas, honest business dealings caused Devadatta to lose a transaction. In that past life, the future Devadatta and the Bodhisattva were rival junk traders selling pots and pans. In each city, they would divide the streets and decide who would go where first. Then they would separate and call out, "Who wants to buy pots? Who wants to buy pans?" Once in a city, There was a widow living with her daughter who used to be rich but was now very poor. They had a large golden bowl coated with dull copper. These women had no idea of the bowl's true value. When Devadatta appeared at their door, the daughter asked her mother to exchange the bowl for something else. Devadatta, being greedy, immediately recognized that the bowl was worth a fortune, but decided to deceive the poor women. He threw the bowl on the ground, declared it worthless, and left with the intention of returning to buy it for a pittance. Soon after, the Bodhisattva visited the house, and the women hesitantly offered to trade the bowl for something else. The honest Bodhisattva told them the bowl's true value and said he could not afford to pay even a small part of its worth. The women were overjoyed and deeply respected the Bodhisattva for his honesty. They asked him to give them whatever he could. The Bodhisattva gave them all his money and all his pots and pans. With the golden bowl in hand, the Bodhisattva hurried across the river because he guessed Devadatta's intention. After the Bodhisattva left, Devadatta returned to the house. The widow ran out and scolded him for attempting to deceive them. She informed him that another honest scrap dealer had bought the bowl and paid them handsomely. Realizing his failure, Devadatta lamented and became like a madman. He tore his clothes, threw his belongings aside, and chased after the Bodhisattva, shouting that the Bodhisattva had stolen his golden bowl. When he reached the riverbank, he saw the Bodhisattva being ferried across halfway. He loudly called the ferryman to stop, but the Bodhisattva quietly told the ferryman to continue. As the Bodhisattva's figure faded away, Devadatta's hatred surged within him. Hot blood poured from his mouth. His heart burst in two, and he fell down dead. Thus, Devadatta was destroyed by his own dishonest business practices. The Bodhisattva became wealthy from selling the golden bowl he had obtained honestly. He lived the rest of his life doing good deeds and always giving to others. When he passed away, his honesty helped him attain better future lives, eventually leading to Buddhahood. Conversely, Devadatta's unwholesome actions also led him to corresponding future lives. Devadatta continued to oppose and conflict with the Buddha. In the Buddha's final life, after attaining enlightenment, Devadatta even plotted to kill the Buddha. It is said that the earth opened up and he fell into hell. J3. The final question is whether there is any aspect of my job that makes me uncomfortable and my mind is not at peace. If an occupation has passed the first two criteria mentioned, we must consider other aspects that might affect our spiritual progress. This is not simple. Since no job is perfect, each of us must decide which factors are unmanageable. Dishonest colleagues, rude customers, lung-damaging chemicals, products that pollute the environment, indirect associations with companies exploiting labor. In my opinion, the best way to determine if a job is right livelihood is to measure its impact on the mind. For example, a company dumping toxic waste into a river affecting fish and other wildlife. Later, workers in the company learn about this reckless dumping. Two of these workers care deeply about practicing right livelihood. Should they leave their jobs at this company? One worker is filled with disgust at what has happened. His mind repeatedly recalls images from the news about the event. He thinks about the unwholesome nature of those who made the decision, and his mind fills with accusations from his perspective. The second worker continues to work with compassion for those affected, including those responsible for the decision. She hopes that those in power in the company will realize their wrongdoing and take steps to correct and prevent similar issues in the future. This thinking keeps her mind at peace. Some might say both workers should quit because they work for a company with no conscience. Others might argue that only the worker discontent with the company should leave, as the job negatively impacts his mind. We need to use wisdom and understanding of the Buddhist teachings to discern what is right. Ethical principles help us know right from wrong. We do not want to participate in or support unethical actions. Furthermore, ignoring our conscience is also unethical. If we tell ourselves, I cannot change anything and what happens does not affect me personally, we separate ourselves from the global community. The Buddha's teachings on loving kindness advise us to care not only for ourselves and our relatives, but also for our neighbors, community, and everyone. Each of us is just a small, individual cell, but together, with billions of other cells, we become part of the world. Therefore, we have a duty to protect justice. But, and this is very important, in doing so, we must be careful not to harbor ill will or blame others with hatred. Any intentional action, even one intended to correct a wrong, must originate from love and compassion for others and all beings. With this mindset and filled with compassion, we can then act. Returning to the question of whether the two workers at the polluting company should quit their jobs, we cannot draw a quick conclusion. Depending on our spiritual level, leaving might be right or wrong. But one thing is certain, the important thing is always to protect and nurture our wholesome mind. A passive attitude towards evil is not wholesome. However, anger, rage, or hatred is also not wholesome. Even if we decide to quit to maintain right livelihood, quitting with anger does not benefit our spiritual path. We must keep our minds calm, free from hatred, and full of mindfulness. We must always remember that our ultimate goal is to free the mind from all greed, hatred, and delusion. The most profound impact we can make in this world is to face every situation with a clear, compassionate, and loving mind. With a calm and detached mind, we can act or choose not to act, or do anything that best cultivates and manifests our love and compassion. Based on the points mentioned above, it is best for the workers at the polluting company to practice calming their minds. Then, with a clear and calm mind, they can consider their personal and social conditions and decide whether to continue their association with the company. This is the most loving and compassionate action the workers can take. They can consider how significant the event is, whether it is isolated or part of the company's general policy, whether they are directly involved, and whether they can continue working there without feeling too troubled. A sensitive worker, even if not involved in management, might feel more distressed than an indifferent official. If the company's unethical behavior makes the worker uncomfortable, disturbing their peace of mind and focus on work, they must take decisive action. Quitting is just one option. There are many other ways. For example, workers can petition the company to stop the wrongdoing, report the company's activities to the authorities, help the victims, write suggestions to the company on preventing future mistakes, or transfer to another department. If a worker decides to quit, they need not rush. They can start by discreetly exploring other job opportunities. At each stage, they must ask themselves, what can I do to show renunciation, love, compassion, and concern for all beings? What actions can support the inherent goodness of the mind? Beyond ethical concerns of the company, if you have to worry about other issues, the job might not be right livelihood. For instance, a normal job might seem ideal, but it's unacceptable if the boss has a habit of harassment, is always angry, or if many colleagues drink alcohol during lunch, have behind closed doors parties, or use drugs in the workplace. Even if you can maintain your independence in such environments, you must decide if such colleagues affect your mind or hinder your spiritual development. Determining if a job is right livelihood depends on the individual. The same situation might lead one person into unwholesome actions, while another sees it as an opportunity to practice patience and compassion. Following right livelihood. At this point, some may feel disheartened realizing their job isn't right livelihood. They might ask, what should I do now? The answer is there are many options, including ways to change the situation without quitting the job. As mentioned above, you could first try to encourage the company to correct its wrongdoings. If you feel uncomfortable due to the behavior of your colleagues, remember the Buddha's teachings on loving kindness, metta. Love and compassion can conquer even the hardest hearts. It's said that nothing can harm a person full of loving kindness, not even bullets or fire, let alone workplace annoyances. If each day before starting work, you spend a few minutes contemplating loving kindness, who knows what changes might occur? Even those who usually act unwholesomely may change if someone, somewhere, sends them pure, strong, loving kindness daily. Before giving up on a tough job, try this method. Even if your colleagues don't change, your mind will likely become more peaceful. You may begin to feel kindness and compassion towards those who previously annoyed you. However, some jobs or situations are beyond reform, and we must leave them. Sometimes we must sacrifice to follow the Buddha's path. He taught that we shouldn't seek profit through wrongful means, when not for our own gain or others, not for children, wealth, or position, not for profit by wrongful means. Only then is one moral wise and true. For those with special skills or connections, quitting or changing careers may be easy, requiring little sacrifice. But for those with few options, they might fear losing a steady income, especially if they have children to support. However, when it comes to human dignity, we must act. This doesn't mean acting on impulse, but planning carefully with all our ability. Then after planning, act with faith. It's said, those who protect the Dhamma protects. Fad 303. This means that when we rely on what we know in our hearts to be true, everything will turn out well, bringing much happiness. I found this to be true in my life. Here's my story of following right livelihood with full faith. Before founding the Bhavana Society, I was the abbot of a small but well-known temple in Washington, D.C. for 20 years. I had a position in the community, a solid status, an energetic board of directors, friends, and family around me. However, I still dreamed of establishing a meditation center where people could come to learn the Dhamma and meditate. The Buddha always emphasized learning the Dhamma and meditating as the most important things. Yet I saw many people had nowhere to go when they wanted to meditate for a while. My intentions were good and my faith strong. Friends and family advised against it. You hold a high position at the first Theravada temple in America, right in the capital. You shouldn't leave. To some extent, they were right. Leaving Washington, D.C. to establish a meditation center in the countryside was a leap from a respected position to uncertainty. The land my friend Matthew Flickstein and I found for the center was deep in the forests of Western Virginia. The secluded, quiet, serene forest seemed an ideal environment for teaching Dhamma and meditation. The land was beautiful, far from Washington's bustle, but in a conservative Christian area, distant from our supporters. The place was entirely unfamiliar, and we started the center not knowing anyone. Our new society had no members. We didn't know how we would sustain ourselves. Family and friends worried about my meals. Others worried about my safety. But I believed that with good intentions, no matter how conservative the locals, they would see we meant no harm and didn't oppose their religion, and they wouldn't harm us. Soon after buying the land, we eagerly erected a sign by the road reading, Dhamma Village. Soon after, someone altered the sign to read, Damned Village. Later, the sign was taken down. Despite curses and obstacles, we pursued our project. Almost all friends advised against it, and encouragement came from less than 5 people. If anything went wrong, we had no one to help. Friends and family in Washington were 100 miles away. I can't describe all the early difficulties. Even the friend who helped start the center seemed uncertain at times. But faith in the Dhamma protected me. My desire was to spread the Dhamma through teaching and writing, freely available to everyone. As a novice monk, I never accepted offerings for Dhamma talks. As I grew older, I learned that the Buddha forbade selling the Dhamma. He advised, don't be a Dhamma merchant. Over time, things stabilized and we created a meditation center in the forest. Many strange things happened. Unexpected support arrived when we needed it most, and unexpected connections yielded results. Somehow we thrived and grew. Personal experience has taught me that when I follow the peaceful, happy call of my heart, sacrificing for dignity and wholeheartedly pursuing truth, the rewards of right livelihood follow. I also understand that economic conditions can make choices difficult, especially for those with limited or overly specialized skills. What if there's only one industry in the area? If you have many children, elderly parents, or a chronically ill child needing care, and the only convenient job is at a nearby liquor store, what then? Or you live where hunting and fishing are necessary for survival. What does right livelihood mean for those in harsh economic conditions or forced by the powerful into illegal activities like growing drugs? If you're in such situations, take comfort knowing that when you don't intend to harm, you're not responsible for harmful outcomes you're not directly causing. A story from the Buddha's time illustrates this. The daughter of a wealthy businessman had heard the Dhamma and reached the first stage of enlightenment. One day, a handsome ivory trader passed through her village and she fell in love. Without a word to her family, she followed him home and they married. As the hunter's wife, she had to clean and prepare his hunting gear. She performed these duties dutifully. They had 7 children, and eventually, their children also married. Right livelihood. One day when the Buddha observed the world with his divine eye, he saw that this entire family could be enlightened, so he visited them. The Buddha first went to an empty trap set by the hunter. He left his footprint beside the trap and waited behind a bush. When the hunter arrived and saw the empty trap with footprints next to it, he thought someone had stolen his prey. Seeing the Buddha by the bush, he aimed his bow and arrow at the Buddha, but became immobile in that position. His 7 children came looking for their father, and seeing him standing there with his bow drawn but unable to move, they also aimed their bows at the Buddha and became immobile. Finally, the wife came looking for the whole family. She saw everyone aiming their arrows at the Buddha and cried out, spreading her arms, "Don't kill my father." When her family heard these words, they thought the man must be her father whom they had never met. The husband thought, "This is my wife's father." The children thought, "This is our grandfather." Their hearts filled with love for this man, and they lowered their weapons and greeted him. The Buddha then gave them a sermon, and they all attained the first stage of meditation. When the Buddha returned to the monastery, his disciples were very surprised and asked, "How could this be? How could this woman prepare bows and traps to help kill animals if she understood the Dhamma?" The Buddha explained that the woman did not participate in the killing of animals. Furthermore, she did not want to harm animals. She was simply fulfilling her duty as the hunter's wife. The Buddha further explained, "A hand without a wound can touch poison without harm. No wound, poison cannot penetrate. So it is with a pure mind." Buddha 24. Just as a hand without a wound can touch poison without danger, so wrongful actions cannot affect us if we do not intentionally perform them. Although the hunter's wife prepared the hunting tools, she did so out of obedience to her husband, as in that culture and time, a wife had little choice in such matters. Her lack of intention to harm protected her mind from negative consequences. Since she did not wish to harm animals, her actions were innocent. If you feel your means of livelihood are not good, but have no other way to support yourself and your family, you can keep your current job while gradually looking for a better one. In the meantime, practice loving kindness, send love to all those who may be affected by your work, and keep your mind pure by maintaining your intention on wholesome deeds. If we accept right livelihood as our goal, we can gradually move towards it as our spiritual practice progresses. Ultimately, our work should bring mental comfort to everyone involved, as our actions affect others. I know a couple who run a family business making beautiful wooden toys that are especially safe for children. They then expanded their business to underprivileged communities, creating jobs for many people. Instead of requiring workers to work in a factory, they provided materials, trained them, and allowed workers to make toys at home, paying them per product. This method allowed workers to focus their lives around their families and work or rest as they pleased. Sometimes people ask me, how can I find a job according to right livelihood? Since the age of 12, I have had only one job, being a monk. I'm not the best person to help you choose a profession or find a job. However, I can say this, finding right livelihood is like starting any major new task. Don't make it too important. Just take it one step at a time. Mindfulness of right livelihood. Accepting that our work is an aspect of our spiritual practice is not easy. Many people separate their work from their spiritual life. However, when we sit down to meditate and reflect on our past actions, we must acknowledge that our work is indeed our action, even if it is done under orders or job requirements. Lying is still lying, even if we are paid to do it. We are responsible for what we say or do, both in this life and in the future. Therefore, we must uphold ethics in our work as we do in other actions. As with right speech and right action, right livelihood requires us to always purify our actions, whether at home or at work. Even if our job is considered right livelihood, each working day we must remain mindful of ethical issues as they arise. We must be clearly aware of the 5 precepts and carefully guard against breaking them. Ethical issues outside of the 5 precepts require us to consider whether we can bear the consequences of those actions. As our mindfulness meditation practice progresses, we may become more patient and calm in situations we previously found intolerable, and we can be content with any honest work. The most important thing to remember is that our work should not hinder our spiritual progress. When we do not harm ourselves by breaking precepts or engaging in unethical activities, our minds will be peaceful and free. With a peaceful and free mind, we can naturally progress on the spiritual path. When obstacles are removed, we just need to keep moving forward. This can be compared to how we sustain ourselves. When hungry, we eat. When thirsty, we drink. We wear warm clothes when it's cold. We prevent illness. We avoid actions and situations that endanger our bodies. But we do not proclaim, "I must live, I must live." If we have provided the basic necessities, the body will automatically sustain life. Similarly, in right livelihood, our sole responsibility is to avoid harming ourselves and others so that we can maintain a peaceful and pure mind. With a free mind, we can meditate and progress on the path to happiness, following the footsteps of the Buddha. If we want to advance faster, we can look for jobs or careers that cultivate and support our practice, encouraging us to be more diligent. Such work will create situations that challenge our shortcomings, allowing us to improve without creating excessive pressure and avoiding issues we are not yet ready to handle. For example, someone trying to cultivate more refined states of concentration might find suitable work in stable, easy tasks that do not require much mental effort. Conversely, someone cultivating patience might thrive in a job that involves dealing with difficult people or challenging situations. During meditation, take some time to apply the 3-tiered self-inquiry method mentioned earlier to assess how your current job contributes to right livelihood. From there, you can decide if any improvements are needed. Ask yourself what you can do to make your work more beneficial for yourself and others. Summary of right livelihood. Here are the key points to remember about right livelihood. Our means of livelihood should not negatively impact our spiritual development. We can evaluate whether a job is right livelihood using a 3-tiered assessment method. At the first level, we consider whether the job is inherently harmful to others or ourselves. At the second level, we examine whether the job requires us to break any of the 5 precepts. Finally, we consider whether other factors related to the job make it difficult for our minds to be at peace. Loving kindness can positively influence a challenging work environment. If we do not intend to harm anyone, our minds will not be tainted by the negative consequences of our work. Right livelihood is the ultimate goal to achieve as our spiritual practice progresses. Thank you for listening. If you found this video helpful, please share it with those who might benefit from it. Don't forget to leave your thoughts in the comment section below. Hit the like button, follow, and turn on the notification bell. This is how you can show your support for me. Once again, thank you very much, and see you in the next videos.